Abdul Salam says he is over 100 years old. His wife, Mustafa Begum, guides him to their shelter in the Kutupalong refugee camp. He says the first time he fled violence in what was then Burma was when the British were fighting the Japanese during World War II. But he has fled military crackdowns on the Rohingya 3 times since then, in 1978, 1992 and 2.5 months ago. And this time he says he won't go back. I feel bad for my home, but I'm afraid to go back because they could kill me, he says. There's no point in sending us back to Myanmar because there is no security for us there. Rights groups say the Rohingya have suffered systematic atrocities by the Myanmar army in recent months. Hundreds of Rohingya villages have been destroyed and burned to the ground. The UN says Rohingya women have been gang raped by Myanmar soldiers. It's estimated that hundreds of Rohingya men, women and children have been killed. But the Bangladeshi and Myanmar governments are already working on a plan to send back hundreds of thousands of refugees to Myanmar. They say it will be voluntary and is aimed to start in 2 months.
So what would the Rohingya refugees go back to inside Myanmar? The Myanmar government doesn't recognise them as an ethnic group. It withdrew their citizenship in 1982, giving them limited access to education and healthcare and making them vulnerable to arbitrary arrest. Now the UN says, how can a people go back to a country in which they are still vulnerable to the kind of violence and persecution from which they fled?
The UN says the root causes of persecution, such as lack of citizenship, must be addressed first, or the Rohingya may suffer more violence.
One of the things we need to really underscore is we shouldn't rush into this. Conditions for return need to be addressed. And we're clear, conditions today in Myanmar are not ripe for refugees to go home.
Abdul Salam says his village, like many others, was burned down by the Myanmar military. He has nowhere to go back to. They will not allow a single Rohingya to live there, he says. They will slaughter us all. Please don't send us back as bait for the monster. The fear of a man who has fled for his life time and time again. Stratford, Al Jazeera, Kutupalong refugee camp, Bangladesh.